Hey there, independent Scientologists. Discover a new perspective to your bridge by visiting ao-gp.org. Get in session with remote auditing using the Theta Meter. Are you curious about where you stand? Head on over to ao-gp.org now and take our free personality test. Join the growing group of independent Scientologists today.
Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 9, episode 5. I'm here with Scientologirl and Arthur Moudakis, and we are going to do Scientology and self-discipline. And I'm gonna add into this as well, maturity.
Okay.
And I think that will it's sort of a modifier for self. That will modify.
Isn't it just wine that matures?
In the 21st century, and then this will be a good way to start it off. In the 21st century, that might be the case. So,
yeah.
Yeah, so I think this might actually be a very good one, quite honestly, because let's also just say that we are completely shooting from the hip today. There is no script or anything. We just decided self-discipline, and we're all like, yay.
That was at the top of yesterday's podcast as another option. So we're going to be doing a podcast on psychedelics and Scientology, but we don't have time to do it today. But this is sort of a introduction to that in a way, because one of the things that I wanted to start off with is the observation, and I'm sure Lisa will chime in, maybe you too, Art. When a person does drugs and they're young,
Sorry.
when a person does drugs and
we have 9 cats, fellows. That's why. Yeah.
Their maturity level tends to stop when they do hard drugs, whether it's street or it's pharmaceutical. And they never mature beyond that point.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And also their empathy level as well.
Is not
it's
nearly
very stunted.
Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah, their empathy is stuck as well, and it becomes sort of the I, me, mine thing.
Yeah. My question though, and we obviously haven't researched any peer review for this, but is it that they were never mature to start with? Or, from trauma and stuff like that, because trauma also stunts a person, even LRHs, you can get stuck at a certain age kind of thing. So is it that, or is it that the drugs make people immature?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And that's a great question.
Yeah. And I'm just as an aside, since we were just talking about that and you're in the middle of it, do you feel like you've matured on any of your viewpoints and the realizations that you've had since being on the Purif in some way? I'm just curious as a tangential thing. His audio shut off.
Oh, dear.
Yep. Okay.
There we go.
I'm back.
Okay.
So today's day 13.
Almost 2 weeks.
Almost 2 weeks. And that's a really hard question to answer, because my body's still re-navigating or
rewiring.
Yeah, perfect. So I don't know, it's a hard one to say. However, there is a clarity of mind coming through, very much so. And when we do the psychedelic one, I'll share some of the experiences I've had around that, especially because I've taken plenty of psychedelics before, and how that's come through in the Purif so far, and I'm sure there's more to come. That one's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, I would say that, immaturity, right, is obviously it's an awareness thing. So by raising your awareness, which, as Artie said, you know, he feels there's more clarity coming. That's obviously raising his awareness, you know, naturally. I mean, even if he hasn't identified it as such,
Mhm.
you know, maybe he might at some point.
Well,
I can
the
feel it coming in that sense. I could kind of see an end goal, but I'm just not there yet.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Uh,
because the body's still quite overwhelmed, so it's really hard to be clear about what's actually happening
mhm.
because there's
I
so
mean,
much going on at the moment.
Right.
I guess it's also important to evaluate what is immaturity, what is maturity, you know,
Well, I think it's a relative thing.
right?
If it's tangential to awareness
Mm,
and self-discipline,
Mm.
then a person who is immature. Let's say this: if a person is horribly selfish, are they mature?
no,
So are they self-disciplined?
no,
No. So all of these things they go hand in hand with. I mean, self-awareness
key.
is
Yeah.
key. Am I the drama? Am I selfish?
Right.
I mean, and that's
Well,
what it comes down to, is they're not aware of their other dynamics.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it
is
seems.
mature the right word though?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Well, what are other synonyms? Because that could elucidate more clarity on that. Because
Yeah, I do know that when you think in terms of, and I'm sorry to interrupt,
no, it's fine.
if you think in terms of like immaturity, like what's one of the things that is kind of like very much prevalent with people who are immature? Well, I think, or even like let's say, okay, so immaturity comes from having a childlike point of view, right?
Mhm.
So then you've got to ask yourself, okay, well, what do children do? Well, sometimes they could be, especially in teenagers, there's almost a sense of entitlement, like the world owes them something before they realize the real world owes them shit, right?
Mhm.
So that's part of it. Then there's also the victim mentality, because
Well, I wouldn't disagree there
yeah,
at all. I would have
at
to.
least somebody who's dependent upon others, you know, so it's not somebody who is self-assured, what's the word I'm looking for, like, well, part of it is self-discipline as well.
Mhm. Party.
Mm. I think, well, I'm just looking at the word mature now.
Mhm.
And so the first definition is fully developed physically, full grown. Um, what else have we got here? Of thought or planning, careful and thorough.
Mhm.
So if you're planning something, you've reached a stage of maturity where it's at its peak. It can't go any
Right.
further from that. Having reached a stage of mental or emotional development, characteristic of an adult. And
Yeah,
see,
that's
the
probably
thing,
Yeah.
most applicable.
Yeah, that's probably the most applicable one.
well, and that's kind of a tricky one as well, because it really depends on what society deems a mature adult to be. Is that a
Mm,
taxpayer? Is that somebody with a
Well, it is an
house and a
arbitrary
white
now,
picket
isn't it?
fence
Yeah.
with a German Shepherd out the front?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and that's the thing and I'm gonna go off in another direction that'll bring us back into this, is somebody that is out ethics or of criminal nature, are they mature? My
Mm,
answer would be no,
No,
because
yeah.
prisons are full of people who made bad, immature decisions.
Yeah.
That is not something. But on the opposite side of that, you've also got white collar crime
Yeah.
and politicians.
yeah.
I'm going to go so far as to
Well,
say
yeah.
that responsibility plays a role. So if you're immature, you're obviously not being responsible. So I would summarize it as being as maturity being
Your response.
responsibility for the age you're at, if that makes sense. So a kid can still be responsible, but
Mm,
not as responsible as an adult would be for that age. So that would be my definition of maturity.
Mhm.
responsibility is age specific in a sense, because at different stages through your life, your responsibilities will change.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I think.
That's why I
Yeah.
opened with in the society that we have right now, it is incredibly rare. And this is probably a pinhole in the fabric of the whole thing, of the number of people that we see here at AOGP who have no street drug history.
Yeah.
It is very very rare. And I think that and I'm not talking about like, and I'm not discounting it as a drug, but I'm not talking about marijuana. I'm talking about hard drugs tend to stick people at that maturity level, whether it was 14 or in one case we had one person who started doing hard drugs at 11 years old. And that person was indicative of acting still 11 years old 15 years later.
Mm. Yeah.
11 years
Well,
old.
even marijuana can do that. Marijuana, even alcohol can do that as well. Because at those ages, like I suppose on one hand, there is a medicinal benefit to marijuana,
Mhm.
which we're hearing about now, in microdoses, certain
Yeah.
elements of the plant. But then when you're fully intoxicated by the plant, it will do the same thing as well. And the
Mhm.
hard thing with marijuana is it's so well
Insidious.
promoted that
Yeah.
people, yeah, and it's people talk about it everywhere. You see it in films, they're having a great day smoking a big joint.
Peace
The
and love is
promotion
promoted
around,
with it.
Yeah, you
that's
chill.
right.
Mhm.
That's right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so there's, it
It's a
may not seem
herb.
like it, but yeah, all the justifications are there to really use it, but it also has a disassociative effect about it as well.
Yeah.
And so that will
That's
definitely stunt the development of somebody's emotional state if it's used all the time. And because it's so used all the time, it's got its hooks. They say it's not um, addictive, but it's addictive in a emotional, mental way where it's full escapism.
yeah,
Man, I had a hard day.
it's
I need a joint.
gambling. Gambling doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
have, aside from the dopamine effect,
I
doesn't
knew
have a-
we were going to head in that direction.
it doesn't have a direct, chemical effect on the body, obviously. So there's no chemical dependence, but it can still be addictive because of the effect that's caused. I mean,
Yeah.
with marijuana, the THC, I don't see how it can't be addictive. It might not, like, again, it might not have its chemical issues, but I've seen people who cannot live without
Out
this
it.
stuff.
Well, right, because
100%.
it's a crutch, and that comes back down to self-discipline.
Yeah.
If you can't stop yourself from doing something, I mean, it's not, self-discipline isn't just getting, and I'll make a prediction here that this podcast will probably do as well as the What Drugs Do to You podcast.
Yeah.
Nobody
We'll-
wants to touch self-discipline and responsibility or what drugs do to you.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, I'm just going to put it out there that's part of the reason it's self-discipline, irresponsibility. Self-discipline isn't just doing things. Self-discipline is not doing things as well.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to take a victim standpoint here and say that we have been programmed and brainwashed.
Sure.
If you want to look for and identify the real gateway drug, it is sugar. Sugar, the fact that we have morbidly obese people, and the statistics in the US alone on the Western diet, that, I mean, 70%, I think I read, of the stuff in grocery stores has sugar in it, whether they disguise it as sucrose or dextrose or whatever it is. That it is insane.
Yeah, well, and here we don't even have it, but high fructose corn syrup it's like water in the US. It's in everything these days, and that's it's even worse.
Right.
So that's, well, and
Even aside from the sugar thing, you
right.
know,
Well, how can you be self-disciplined if you can't get the right thing?
exactly. I mean, you have all these different distractions: social media, online shopping, gambling, nicotine, even. You know, like there's so many different things that you can get roped into the physical universe, and I feel like drugs is such a
Well, it's
it's the worst part
yeah.
because you know you there's it's in two parts. The first is obviously, you know, self-discipline to say no, right? It's your beingness where you can just decide, and the second is the effects on your body that like keeps pulling you, keeps reminding you, hey, you need the stuff.
Mhm.
So
Artie, I know you probably have something to
Well,
say on the aspects of sugar and how that affects self-discipline as it being a drug.
well, there's a there's a trend with sugar, which is caffeine as well. And
yes.
so, you know, we have the coffee and then we become depleted. So say in like a blue collar job, for example, a lot of office workers, you know, they're sitting, they're not being very physical active. They rely on their caffeine to keep their work going. But then once their adrenals deplete from the caffeine rush, then their body craves sugar. And that's why you have cafes with coffee, cakes. You know, it's too late in the day to have coffee, and I'll just have like an energy drink or a Coke or some kind of high sugar to revive what the body's used up.
Stimulant. Yeah. An
Um,
upper.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
then that in itself is an addiction as well.
I
Mhm.
As
mean,
much as I love coffee, I'm somewhat disciplined with my coffee. Like I'll have a maximum of so many a day, and then that's it.
Mhm.
Um, but it's still there. You know what I mean?
Right.
yeah, my favorite coffee
Yeah.
is a mochaccino, and that's like a triple threat because you've got the sugar, you've got the caffeine, and you
Yes.
have I can't remember what it's called. I think it starts with a T, but there's something in chocolate that also is addictive. I found this out recently.
Mhm.
So it's like a
Mm,
triple threat, you know, and I mean it's just crazy. We walk around every day and we need these things. We must have these
Yeah.
things.
Well, in Artie, I don't know if you remember this. Lisa's a little too young to remember this, but in the 70s, in the 70s, it
I'm
was a
not that
rare,
old either. Just so you know.
yeah, it was a rare thing to see an obese person.
Yeah.
And this was
I do
before,
remember that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was very, very rare. And it was, you know, they used to be that body type used to be, and I'm not fat shaming here. It's just an observation. It used to be a circus sideshow thing because it was so unusual and they typically had thyroid issues and it wasn't caused by the food. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that obviously I think most people, unless they're incredibly unaware, they you're being manipulated by restimulators, by things that they don't have the appearancy of being drugs. And how does this play into what self-discipline is now compared to what self-discipline was in 1924, 100 years ago? Because you didn't have, I mean, the food chain was completely different. Corporations, I mean, you know, the Industrial Revolution had happened and or was occurring still, and you had the Roaring 20s, and you see the videos and everything like that. But I mean, they still had, well, you know, prohibition came about, and you know what alcohol does in the body, what it turns into, all this stuff. So
Mm.
was self-discipline. I mean, you look at LRH and how disciplined he was in everything that he did,
Mhm.
that
That's
we know,
mind blowing.
that's
Yeah.
mind-blowing. And he was 10 years old in the 20s.
Well, I'm probably going to get shot for this, but I will say he did smoke and he
Yes.
had a little bit of a belly.
Yes, and he liked his Coke every day at St. Hill. You know, the smaller
Yeah.
bottles.
This is exactly what I'm saying is that there is self-discipline. Okay, fine, fair enough. You get up, you go to work every day. You might even be able to go to the gym. You know, take care of your kids responsibly, all of that stuff. But when it comes to addictions,
Mhm.
when it comes to things like sugars, I mean, at that point in time, did they have cocaine in Coke?
I think that was
Was it
pulled out in the
earlier?
early night or in the early 20th century, if I remember
Well,
correctly.
still sugar in any case in Coke is bad. And then nicotine in cigarettes and
Yeah,
stuff.
it was sugar for decades. It was sugar in the 70s
Yeah.
when I had a Coke or a Pepsi or a Dr. Pepper or Mountain Dew, whatever. It was
Mhm.
sugar. It wasn't until the mid 80s that it turned into high fructose corn syrup, and that's when
Something else.
the
Yeah.
obesity epidemic started to happen, and you saw very heavy people. I mean, I have seen literally thousands of times going to the grocery store where, like, when we go to the grocery store, we get 45 liters of water, spring water,
Mm.
at the
Yeah.
Woolies, which is a higher end grocery store. These people would walk out of the grocery store and they have 6 12-packs of Mountain Dew
Yeah.
on the edge of their carts, hanging over, one half on the outside, one half on the inside. This is people's water.
Yeah.
This is what they drink instead as a replacement to water.
I
So
used
I
to
have
be
a
one of those
theory as
people.
well.
yeah.
I have a theory that it's more than just sugar, because tap water is pretty ugly to drink. Yeah, so you buy bottled water, and even sometimes bottled water isn't exactly pure water either. For a lot of these, like say for alcohol and for soft drinks, they're actually made with pure water. So sure,
Mhm.
it's got sugar, sure it's got this, sure it's got that, but pure water is really palatable.
Mhm. Yeah.
Really palatable.
Yeah.
And so it's all distilled waters they use. Like the water they put in those soft drinks is way cleaner than you purchase in a bottle or draw from your tap. The
Mhm.
same with alcohol. Like it's crisp.
Mhm.
Its ppm, particles per million, is
Yeah.
0.
Yeah, it has to be.
Well, fun fact here
Yeah.
in South Africa, even some of the lower class people don't drink tap water. They would prefer to buy. And there's a lot of
That's right.
businesses lately that are actually popping up that sell water because we had a test done, I think, a few months back, where they said that there was something in the water that was carcinogenic, for one, and two, fecal matter was found in the water. So people are just outright
Mhm.
refusing to use that water to drink from, which, I mean, we don't either. Like, I would not touch the stuff.
Yeah.
So, the self-discipline is hard. It's very hard when everywhere you turn, you go to a convenience store, it's a food desert. You go to the grocery store, you have to, what is it? Where you have to stick to the outside of the grocery store, the where all the vegetables and the meats and things are, that's
Mhm.
the safe place. In the middle is where you don't want to go, because that's all the processed foods, with the exception of processed meats, which there are a lot of processed meats here. I mean, everybody likes their sausages here
Yeah.
a lot, so that's pretty processed.
Wors, we call it.
Right. So, it depends on where you're at. It's difficult to be self-disciplined, but is it harder to be self-disciplined now than it was 40 years ago because of this? Or is it just
I
an
believe so.
excuse?
When you say because of
I
this,
believe so.
Because of sugar everywhere, all
yes,
of
because
these.
I don't think people realize the damaging effects of it. Because if they actually did, they would not have birthday parties with cake. They would not have ice cream for kids who are sad. They would not, I mean, kids and sugar, it's like synonymous.
Yeah.
And it is insane. And even if it's oh, it's just a little treat here and there, right? Now I mean, I sincerely think that part of the problem with people who are overweight, right? And I know because I have been there. So like if you go and you have somebody who has had trauma, you obviously you give them sugar when they're sad. What's that going to teach them?
Mhm.
That is the escape, and that develops bad eating habits and stuff like that. And you use food as a crutch, just like normal other drug addicts use drugs as a crutch to help them deal. Drug addicts you can't tell me that somebody who has had a good, stable upbringing, happy in life, perfect, no problems, no trauma, is going to go on drugs and be, like, okay, I'm going to be a drug addict now and stay that way. No, at some point they're going to be like, you know what, I got to get my life together.
Mm.
So I
Mhm.
mean, LRH said that alcohol is a forgetter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Right. So that means that they're trying to forget some sort of trauma, and that can be applied to other, uses as well.
Right. Well, and that goes
Yep,
along
yep.
with gaming, goes along with porn, goes along with what else?
Gambling.
Gambling is
All of
at
these
a
distractions.
fever pitch, these distractions, because people are unhappy, so they have no self-discipline because they have things they're trying to shut
Solve.
out,
Yeah.
solve, with something else to distract them from what's really going on. So is there some sort of index with self-discipline and the degradation of the social fabric of our society?
I do also want to say that, as a, like, if your only problems are addiction, right? Then, well, it's kind of like the snake eating its own tail, because you are happy with doing that, but it's not lasting happiness, it's only pleasure. So, and
The
the more you
dopamine hit.
use it, and the more you use it, the more unhappy you become. So, but obviously there has to be that first entry point that's like, I'm not satisfied with life, let's try something. Because it's almost unheard of that somebody forces somebody else to do a drug, right? There has to be some sort of fulfillment that's lacking there.
Yeah, you were the one that took the took
Right.
the thing in the first place.
Right. So the my point is that society is like unhappy, but part of the problem is that they're unhappy because they're doing this stuff as well.
Right. So it's you're contributing to your own misery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like there have been, there's a loop. I mean, I've been there where it was like, just I needed caffeine, I needed sugar, I needed nicotine just to, function. And then that becomes your normal, and also a lack of confront for the issues that you're really facing, for that uncomfortable feeling. And sometimes you have to sit with that uncomfortable feeling and recognize it and find out, what is it that's causing me to be unhappy?
Right.
Instead of bandaging it with all
something
these
else.
recreational things.
Right. Be there and be comfortable. TRs.
Yeah. So
Well, here's a question for you guys. When is it an actual issue?
Lisa?
well, I
Now,
I
is
think
it an issue from the way we observe it, or is it a real issue? Because, like, if we consider like this world, there's so much you can do on this bloody planet, including smoke and take drugs and get sugar highs and that kind of stuff, right?
So yes, that's
Um,
what you chose to do.
there's a very simple answer, and I think this is a credit to you, my love. To the degree you're happy is to the degree your ethics are in.
Yeah.
So if these things, if you are unhappy, if you are unhappy and you are doing these things, right, that's an issue,
Mhm.
because you're plugging holes.
Yeah, you're unhappy to begin with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
yes,
and that's
yes.
and that's and I'm sure that you get the eye roll from people listening to this. They're like, oh God, here we go again. Ethics. But self-discipline is the definition of ethics is eliminating, per LRH, and it's true, is eliminating other fish to fry than what you should be doing, which goes back to our podcast, that you're doing something other than what you are doing that we did yesterday.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it requires self-discipline, the realization that I need to do something. I mean, most people change their ways under the penalty of possible death or severe sickness, which also equals significant expense in a healthcare facility before they'll do something. It has, I dated a girl who said, I guess I haven't gotten to rock bottom yet.
Oh, wow.
Mm, mm.
You know, I mean, that's where
And that's a
people,
thing.
yeah,
Oh,
it's
we
a
can't do anything for them until they hit rock bottom.
hit rock
Like,
bottom.
Yeah.
give me a break.
Yeah.
Give me a, is that
Yeah.
avoidance or
I
what?
just was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, so that just gives you license to, you know, just keep,
That's insane.
you know,
Yeah.
letting the plane crash towards the ocean type of a thing because, well, you know, we've got 15,000 feet. We're all right.
Yeah.
But what is
Yep.
your angle of descent and your speed? But this is where people are at as far as self-discipline
Mhm.
goes. And
Mm.
that's because there's something there that they're not. And I know we always come back to this, but this is what it is. There's something there that they're not confronting.
Yeah, it's an awareness issue, a consciousness issue, and
Yeah.
I think, you know, when it comes to like this kind of thing, it's difficult because people don't know that they don't know. Eh,
Yeah, that's unconscious incompetence.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
And
the thing is, the Thetan knows, and that is why they're unhappy. Because they might have analytically have all these justifiers. No, I need this for my stress. I need to do this. You know, all that stuff. I mean, some people want to change, but then they say, well, you know, I've got, you know, my family doesn't eat this way, so therefore I can't. You know, like there's all sorts of justifiers for not
yeah,
doing
yeah,
the right
a
thing.
lot of social cues and we were talking about agreement
Yeah,
this morning. You know, is it agreement or what LRH calls mutual outrudiments? Is that, well, my mama and daddy, they drink,
yeah. That's
so
just the way it
that's
is.
just the way it is. Mama and daddy do it, I have to do it.
And some people, they're just so fucking stuck on this thing, like, I am who I am. Don't try to change me, you know? And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah, it's so deep. It's so deep inside of me.
Right, right. And then, you know, that's a
Like
service
how deep? A
facsimile.
mile?
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
So, you know, self-discipline requires
yeah,
awareness of yourself. That's the definition of a thetan, is awareness of awareness unit. But self-awareness goes hand in hand with self-discipline and maturity and responsibility. Is, are you self-aware? I mean, you know, how many times do we go out in public and you see people who are completely unself-aware? And I'm not critiquing
Oh
it.
most
man.
of society's walking around like zombies, quite honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah,
You
It
know, like
really,
I've raised this
really
question with
is.
John so many times. How many human beings do you really think are actually out there?
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. And what is the balance
right.
of them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I also wanted to say, part of the self-discipline thing, and all of this stuff that we've been talking about, you know, drugs and stuff like that, is that there is an underlying reactivity, and I think people think that the
Mm,
reactive mind is just like it must be something big, like a blow up at a boss or something,
Mhm.
but reactivity can be so subtle. It can be like that niggling feeling like I
yeah.
must do this now. Then, you know, because obviously with a reactive mind, you have your service facsimiles, you have your now I'm supposed to's, you know, all of these things. So a now I'm supposed to can be, oh, somebody hit my car, therefore, even though it's been a week of success, I must smoke now.
Mhm.
You know, like
It's it,
within trauma, there must be this.
yeah, and
Yes.
it's very
Yes.
difficult to change a pattern of now I'm supposed to's or circuits responses that you have to something when, especially when something negative happens.
Mm,
Well, you know, well, I had a bad work day at work today. I'm going to go have a drink afterwards.
yeah,
That's probably a bad response.
yeah,
Uh, you know, I'm gonna have a joint just to calm down after being in traffic.
right.
That type of thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that's how these things creep up on you. You know, every now and then it's okay. No, 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 no. Self-discipline. There are other things that you could do to make that thing better. But in society, I mean, you know, uh, I'm sure that people listen to it go, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with marijuana being legal. Well, look what's happened in Oregon. They legalized pretty much everything in Oregon. And what's happened to the society up there is not good. It hasn't improved the situation at all to let people just do
Why would it?
whatever drugs that they want to do because it's contra survival to their first dynamic.
It is absolutely shameful that marijuana has become a symbol for spirituality when it actually makes you so fucking unaware.
Well, and that's I think it's obvious
Well,
to us.
I'm going
Go
to
ahead.
disagree with that. I'm going to
Okay.
disagree with that. And we'll really dive into this when we do the psychedelic one. But there is an element of some of these substances that actually is.
Well, it
right?
smacks of that because it causes a release where you back out of the body and you're keyed out for a period of time, and that's where people go. That's the spiritual element that you're talking about, where people are like, ah, this is how I become spiritual. And you know, Rogan has that. That's how we got on that topic of doing
Yeah.
one of those in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, big time.
Well, you know, maybe marijuana can. I think it depends on the person. If you're trying, if your focus is to potentially reach higher states with it, then fine. But I know people who are suffering because of this stuff, because I mean, how well can you do on your 8 dynamics? And your 8 dynamics, if you know work on all of them, they basically relate to spirituality, even though it's physical universe stuff. You're still, if you do well on earth, it's closer to God than you would if you were, for example, doing drugs. So my thing is, I've seen so many people who are literally frying their brains with the stuff, overuse and stuff, and they are not able to function on their dynamics. We're talking about, you know, the second dynamic with like relationships and stuff. Like people can't be effective lovers because it's a problem. Yeah, and I'm
I
not
think it becomes an issue when it's relied upon for daily function.
right.
That's where it becomes a real issue. But like,
Yeah,
let's
there
say, for
is a
example,
gray
you go
area.
camping with some friends, you have a joint, and you all laugh, giggle, and it ends there. It's not an issue in that scenario. But if you need to come home and that's what your go-to is, then that's where you're missing out on the maturity. That's where you're missing out on um, other elements of life. That's when you start missing out on your family, and that's when you start missing out on your kids. You start missing out on other responsibilities in your life, and then that will eventually develop to, I can't even stand waking up. So
Right.
then I'm going to get stoned before I go to work. And then I hate the people at my work. I'm going to get stoned, on my lunch break. And then I'm going, oh my God, I got to face the traffic on the way home. I'll have a joint on the way home. And that's when it becomes a real big issue. You know what I mean?
I mean, the argument
Um,
could be though that you can have a laugh with friends with sugar or alcohol or
True.
caffeine. You know,
100%.
there's
Yeah.
there's all these things. So
Millions of people are doing that at this very moment.
yeah, exactly.
That's right. That's
So
right.
you know,
It's an interesting
I just
subject.
don't like
Really
the
interesting.
promotion of it being a spiritual thing. I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, as far as
I reckon there's a reason for that. There's definitely a reason for that.
well, you
It's
know,
not
it is people are
as
trying to
clear cut.
yeah, the people are trying to
Yeah.
put their finger on what is spiritual and what isn't spiritual. And I think if it makes them feel good, it's spiritual.
Mm.
Because well, and we get back down to, and this goes to what we're going to talk.
Me and Arthur might actually get in some blows on the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
psychedelic podcast.
the psychedelic podcast is it comes down to the body and what sensation and what people are experiencing, and they're mistaking sensation for spirituality.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Like that thing that we were talking about with there's like certain drugs like LSD and stuff where you can see sacred geometry. Now, my argument, like anybody, and apparently the fabric of the universe and, you know, all that stuff. My argument is that while that's pretty and fun and all of that stuff, those things, those shapes and everything, they are still relating to
The
the
physical
physical
universe.
universe, therefore not spiritual.
Mm.
I mean, it might be, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, well,
Do you get what I'm saying?
it's like you say, it's a bit of a snake eating its own tail
Yeah.
type of a thing. But
Mm.
and yeah, I think ultimately, you know, the path is to a person who's very self-disciplined is if they are self-disciplined, they found an answer that leads to some sort of spirituality for them, whether it's good physical health. I mean, you know, most people, if you ask them, you know, what is spiritual to you, what, you know, what would their answer be? Guy on the street, gal on the street. What is spiritual to you?
Going to church, reading the Bible, that sort of thing, I think they'd say.
Probably. Arthur, what do you think?
Could also be, see, I think spiritual is very similar to the word God. You know, it has many meanings, and love as well to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has many, many meanings that isn't that straightforward. And like people tend to create their own definition of what spirituality is, and then they live by it. You know, in my mind, you know, the fact that we're alive, you're a spiritual being, nothing more, nothing less. You know, because without the body, you can't even declare spirituality. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like
because
the moment
you're just being as spiritual as you can be without being in a body.
that's right. You know, so some people will say spirituality is, you know, earth school, as they say. You know, I'm here to learn more lessons, and it's just like, well, what kind of more lessons do you need to learn? Like, just live this life.
Yeah.
You know
Well, and
what I
that comes
mean?
down to awareness. You know, can they even describe? I mean, you know, if you just walk up to somebody and say,
yeah.
are you a descendant of primates, or are you a spiritual being? And we back it up even further.
What's the difference?
Right.
What's the difference?
I think that would definitely depend on
Where? Oh,
at
yes.
what age you're asking as well.
Yeah,
So you ask somebody in their 40s and 50s, they still grew up with that, you know, religious dogma kind of thing. But you ask somebody who's a teenager or like maybe their 20s, they're either going to tell you, I haven't thought about it much, or they're going to say, you know, some woke shit, or, you know, that, or they just going to completely refute that there's no God and everything's science-based and we are descendants from
we live on
evolution.
a flat earth.
Yeah. You know, I think it's important to have gray area. Like you can believe more than one thing.
Yeah, because you don't,
if
they don't have actual answers. It all kind of falls into a more of a philosophical, subjective thing, and well, I'll look at that someday.
And I think the most narrow-minded and unaware people are the people who believe rigidly in something, who cannot change their minds on something.
Dogmatic.
Yeah, Matterhorns, basically.
Yeah, Arthur.
Well, it's funny because growing up, I was always fascinated with the occult. Even as a really young kid, like I learned a lot about, you know, black magic, white magic, occult, symbolism, you know, conjurations, those things. And like even in those books, spirituality is not really a word, like at all. You know, to and that's like the top of the spiritual game, really, isn't it?
Well,
where
by earth
you know you're able
standards,
to manipulate, where you're able to
by earth standards.
manipulate like energies. You know,
Yeah.
people are making apparitions appear through certain sounds and symbols,
Mhm.
but they're not saying it's a spiritual act. And I think spirituality, like if you look at like the social sort of themes at the moment, you've got spirituality, you've got psychedelics, you've got gender issues, you've got, well, depending on, to me it's an issue, and then you know you've got all these dynamics and they're all sort of leading in a really weird direction, because spirituality these days means feeling good. But if you're not feeling
Yeah.
good, right? If you're not feeling good, then you're going through a spiritual crisis.
Yeah,
My
it's,
awakening is coming and it's terrible. Oh my
yeah,
God, is all I
th-
have to say.
yeah. That's where there's a misunderstood, and
And then you get into the Mercury's in retrograde and all
Oh,
all
please
this
don't
stuff.
start. Please, please, pretty please.
well, we're running out of
Because
time
it's all
here.
about avoidance. It's all about
Yeah,
avoidance of pain. And that's
Yeah.
yeah,
all it
yeah,
And
is. It's
right.
the fear of
Avoidance
death
of
pleasure.
and it's the
avoidance of a
pain.
negative sensation.
Yeah.
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 Yes,
We are
yes.
so addicted to sensation. That's the big problem, really.
Yeah, and
Well, my
that's the
theory is,
opposite of what Scientology is trying to achieve in a lot of ways.
my theory is like, let's say you go back to the theta state, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a body anymore. So you can't eat chocolate. You can't get stoned. You can't drive a car. You can't procreate. You can't feel pain. Like one of the most intense feelings that we can ever experience is pain.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm.
no one level to pain.
Mm-hmm.
It has so many levels to it. And imagine, in the theta consciousness, you're observing all this, all these human beings going through this stuff. You can't tell me that that's not appealing because you can't feel any of those things without a body. You might have conscious awareness of it,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't experience it. You can only observe it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So how cool is this body of ours?
this
Pretty
basically
amazing.
comes into stuff like in Buddhism and the Tao and well, even the power of now. So with Eckhart Tolle, he basically says that, if you have attachment to these things, or if you see these things as in a dualistic way, good or bad, and I know we spoke about this a little yesterday, but if you do, then you're going to be stuck in a cycle of rebirth and death over and over and over again until you finally get to this stage where you don't see it as good. And this is something that I've always thought about with Scientology. At the top of the tone scale, there's the serenity of beingness, right? Now, obviously, in a body, there isn't a serenity of beingness for a very long time, because you'll eventually need to eat, you'll need to go to the bathroom, etc., etc. But
Body.
if you're outside of the body, right, serenity of beingness should be you're just serene. There's no needs or wants, right? And if you can only if all you do is perceive, then that should be it. Now, LRH says a Thetan needs a game. Now,
This is where we collide on
yeah,
things.
this is
Lisa.
where we collide, because my opinion is that an unaware Thetan needs a game. Because if you look at these people that have achieved enlightenment, right, they've realized that all of this is just it's a game. Therefore, it's a game of suffering and all of that stuff. Therefore, why play? It's all sort of, like if you're playing a video game, right, you play as a character. They have seen that that's what it is. And the reason why it might seem appealing is because there's all these things on earth that say pleasure, 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 but really,
Well, that's capitalism
they,
too.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
that. But in
And
in
language too.
Yeah.
but according to
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle, there's this part within us. Well, what we actually essentially are and what's inside of us is infinite joy, infinite peace, etc. There's no this longing and craving and grasping for the physical universe, and this is why they don't get reborn as they don't come back to earth, is because they've figured the thing out. They are whole within themselves, therefore they don't need to come back and play the game. Just an interesting thought that I thought I should throw out there
I,
with
Well,
regards to that.
I'm going to put a spanner in that. And sorry,
Let's
I
go,
really
Arthur.
have my reservations. I
I'm
really have my
going to sit back a
reservations.
little bit here.
I used to really enjoy Eckhart Tolle,
Yeah.
but I'm going to say, and a lot of people are going to hate me for this, I believe a lot of the stuff he says is more poisonous than good.
Okay.
because it's very confusing.
Mm.
He speaks really well. Don't get me wrong. You can so relate with the things he says, but how much does he share with you that you can actually resolve within yourself? And it's not much other
Sorry,
than
I
more
just
confusion.
I can't hear Arthur anymore. Sorry, Arthur.
That's all right.
Okay, I hear him. That's fixed. We have a finicky wire that we need to replace over here. So
That's all right. That's all right.
South African.
that's awful. We need to
Yeah.
edit that out.
Yeah,
Gets
yeah.
you there.
I find his work is more poisonous than good. I think he's like a feel good speaker rather than, you've got a problem, you need to confront that shit.
Right. Well, I will say that there was a time when I decided to just, take a little break from society and social media and everything. And I went to reading his book, and
Mm,
I did feel quite anxious, like I was just trying too hard. However,
yeah.
in reading that, plus the stuff that I know, like like the Brahma and other stuff, I feel like expanding on it is necessary, because I do feel like relying on one source is not great. Um, but
Mm.
there was value in his stuff. It just kind of, it was sort of like easier for me
It doesn't
to.
go anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I do like him though. I really do. Just gonna say that.
Can I throw another spanner in for you?
Go ahead. Go
Have
ahead.
you got a pen and paper there?
Yes.
Write down this name, Eckhart Fuel, Thule. And then when we get off, Google both their images and tell me what you see.
What was it? It was TU what?
Thule.
Tule. Yeah,
Thule.
Thule.
Okay.
Sorry, Thule. Yeah, Thule.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And then check out his background and then tell me what you see. But that we'll
Right.
have to cover tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I will do that.
We'll use some self-discipline and come back to that tomorrow. But
Yeah, yeah.
at the end of the day, self-discipline is ethics.
Yeah.
Ultimately, personal first dynamic.
And it's responsibility, because
and
it's
responsibility.
ability to respond.
Yes,
This
ability to
self-discipline.
right,
Yeah.
because if you can't respond and you can't course correct, then you're not
don't have
taking you don't
that.
have any responsibility to make a change.
Therefore, you are not mature and all of that stuff.
Right. And at
That's
the end
right.
of the day, a lot of the things, due to capitalism and unbridled capitalism across the planet, the products that are given to people fuel the inability to be self-disciplined, because there are so many sensationalized things, whether it's food or these other sources,
Mm.
in comparison back before the internet, back before the smartphone, back where, if
I mean, honestly, I'd go so far as to say that they're using our reactivity against us.
that's exactly where I was headed.
The more screwed
100%.
up the planet gets, the more we need these external things.
How bad it is. You need us.
Yeah, and the more reliant we
Yes,
become,
yes.
it's completely suppressive.
Yeah, and it's a dwindling spiral, and the Romans faced the same thing.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's happened throughout the time track, not just on this planet, not just in this galaxy. It's the universe itself, and it's a solution to a problem that becomes a further problem. And self-discipline and awareness are the only ways that you can get out of it. Is you have to raise your head above the canopy of trees in the forest and go, here's where we are and what we're dealing with. And without that, the ability to confront, you well, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So more on this tomorrow. This should be a fun podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll bring my boxing gloves.
Yeah, that's right. And so for Scientologirl and Arthur, we bid you adieu. Arthur, do you have any closing statements before we boogie?
No, to be continued.
To be continued. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Hey, you didn't ask me if I had
Did-
any.
I thought you did. Do you have anything you would like to say?
I do. Arthur, you're wrong.
That's a matter of perspective.
Okay, everybody, hold your breaths. You know, will Scientologirl be
Bested by
Bested-
Arthur.
bested by Arthur in this MMA match of opinions on philosophical viewpoints? Stay tuned to
It's
find
such
out.
a world, isn't it?
Yeah,
This is how wars start.
yeah, that's right. So have a great day, everybody. Namaste, and we love you.